Welcome to Marketing Demystified, the podcast that connects the dots for business leaders to drive revenue through effective marketing strategy. We chat with marketing experts on different topics that will help you ramp up your revenue. We stream live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platforms. Marketing Demystified, the podcast, is presented to you by GrowGetter, your partner in growth marketing. And here's today's.
Hello, everyone. Are you ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered with actionable tips to transform your marketing game? You're in the right place. Welcome to Marketing Demystified. I'm your host, Jem Mancusi, CEO and co-founder of GrowGetter, your growth marketing partner. Let's dive into the critical intersection of marketing technology and authentic human connections with marketing strategist and entrepreneur Casey Cheshire. As the Chief Evangelist at Ringmaster Conversational Marketing, Casey has spent years helping businesses bridge the gap between complex marketing technology and genuine customer interactions. Previously, he founded and led Cheshire Impact, a Salesforce partner for Pardot Professional Services. That's where I first met Casey years and years ago, where his team worked with thousands of organizations on marketing automation implementation. Casey's unique ability to translate complicated marketing technology into authentic customer experiences makes him the perfect guest to discuss how we can remain human-centered in an increasingly data-driven marketing landscape. He's also the author of Marketing Automation Unleashed, the strategic path to B2B growth. Wow. Welcome to the show, Casey.
Thank you. What a cool introduction. I appreciate it.
So excited to have you on the show. We've known each other for a very long time, and I'm really excited to catch up on what's been going on and hear your expertise on this topic.
Man, what a cool pod too. I'm totally digging it. I've been listening to a bunch of episodes, and if you're listening to this, you should just hit subscribe real quick, because this is a keeper right here.
I didn't pay him to say that, I swear. I'm very excited to have you on today. I'd love to kind of hear your perspective on how marketing technology's evolved, over your career.
Oh man, you know what? Like when we first, started working together, marketing automation was that thing, right? It changed my life, my career, everything. Why? Because it got me in that ROI mindset, right? I was just kind of like that activity marketer, just making things happen. More activity was better, I think, but you never really knew if it was going to connect you to the bottom line. But slowly over time, like that worked and it was good. And we implemented a ton of Pardot accounts, but there was a seeping suspicion that happened. And it wasn't until I launched the podcast later on, when I was running that company, and I started actually connecting with customers, having conversations with them, that I realized, you know what? A lot of marketing is getting more and more disconnected. So that's really what drives me crazy these days.
That's so interesting and kind of synonymous with the world a little bit. It's like, as we have more technology available to us to connect, we actually are a little bit disconnected. We're a little bit automated. We're a little bit, personalized at scale. And in some ways that is a lot less human.
You know what? It's crazy. Like, look, I am guilty of this as well. So I'm not like preaching that people should do something that I'm not doing, right? I was Mr. Automation for a long time. But I feel like we've kept putting different apps in front of the relationship, right? Almost like different layers and walls between us and the customer. It was supposed to make it easier to connect, but in the end, it's kind of like put these barriers in front of us. And so I had this question I love to ask you, and then everyone listening. Can you name 7 of your customers by company name? Right. So you don't have to say anything, but like in your head, like, can you name? And usually people, sometimes the logos really stick out. Like, oh, I remember that one, and that one was fun, and that one. But here's another question. Can you name 7 customers by first and last name? Right. And did it feel a little bit more difficult? Does it feel a little bit more like, oh, can I? Right. I feel like the gap between those two is exactly what we've been putting in between everyone with all this technology. Not to say it's bad, it's supposed to help us, but sometimes we can use it as a crutch and it gets in the way of things instead of helping facilitate things. So for me, I started when this sort of my eyes were open. I was like, oh my gosh. Like, so when I see people where their best email gets sent out and they get less and less click-through rate, they get less and less engagement with it. It's the webinar that's killed time and time again, and it's getting less and less engagement, less and less people even viewing the recording. Oh, what's going on here? Same PPC, like all the name a channel, and you see a decline in some stats. You got to wonder if maybe you're disconnected. And here's the crazy thing, right? So we talk about AI hallucinating, right? But I feel like if you haven't talked to your customer lately, and let's be honest, we all probably haven't. That's the mechanism for doing that. And we're probably hallucinating too. One of the things I realized, especially doing the marketing automation, is we can make a really cool email. But man, if we don't actually know what our customer thinks, believes, and I know it's cliche. We talk about know your customer, but we say that, but just saying that doesn't fix it. It doesn't mean you actually know your customer. So if you don't know the answers to these things, what keeps them up at night? No, but no, really, what's the challenge? And maybe it's not your problem that your app solves or that your company solves. Maybe it's another problem. But what are the things that really bother them? What are the things that would make them a hero and get them a promotion? If you don't know those things, we start putting in other data points, right? When we make our marketing campaigns, we make all these reach outs, we name it. Everything from the terrible spam to like an amazing EBM tiered campaign, this and that. What if they don't like stocks, right? What if they don't like your ABM gift? And you don't know unless you've talked to them. And then all you do is hallucinate, put your own bias in the marketing. And then you wonder why, oh man, this is not working, or it's not working as well as it used to.
That's such a fascinating way to describe it, as hallucinating, because that can be a big challenge, is this feeling of like, oh, I don't need to talk to my customers or my prospects or, whoever's in the market, because I know them, right? And I think the longer you've been in a business or the longer you've been in an industry, the harder it is or the easier it is to get into that trap, right? Of like, well, I know them because I've been working with them for so long, or, I've been in this industry for so long, so I don't need to talk to them. But actually that, then you lose the kind of current, like, what's really keeping you up at night today, which is different from what was keeping you up at night yesterday.
Yeah, or the day before, or maybe you were really. So I was really funny thing. I was trying to have a conversation with someone today about Google Analytics, right? And I asked her, "Hey, are you an expert in this?" Just so I know where. It's not really. And I was like, "Well, I was an expert about 10 years ago, so we're basically at the same level." Which means we'll both be trying to figure this thing out together. Everything changes and moves. So you do need some kind of programmatic way to stay in touch, to stay connected with folks. And not only we're hallucinating, but with AI, right? Hey, it can be an awesome helper, but just like all these other apps, it is going to create this avalanche of, I don't call it fake content, but like it's going to be this content creation out the crazy levels on LinkedIn, on social, all the PDFs, all the documents. There's going to be so many fake things that it's going to be that much more important to be connected.
Yeah, absolutely. So how do you think about, like, what's the right balance? Because there is a need for marketing automation at scale and personalization, and we want to use the technology that's at our fingertips, but how do you do that at the right amount while maintaining authentic human connection?
Totally. That's the right question, right? That's the great question of time. And it's almost like that hub and spoke model. It's that, what's at the center of what you're doing. And so I find that there's some core things that make up connected marketing, or connect to market is what I like to say. Like, go to market's a little transactional sometimes, the wording. If they had picked it better, maybe they would have reframed it. But instead of go to market, connect to your market, right? So when I think about the methods that you could do, there's many, but some of the ones that stand out to me are podcasting, community, and also partnerships. These are things that are grounded in a human connection. And it starts as a one-to-one connection, but each one of those things very much can roll off into connecting to many people. So it begins with a one-to-one connection, and then you can repurpose the heck out of it, just like this podcast, into one-to-many type content pieces. But the core of it, the content right now, is being created by two amazing marketers. I guess I'll speak. I'll say two amazing marketers.
Two amazing
compliment each other all day, right? But like, if this conversation makes for great content, content that starts by scraping the web and having AI, not like, no. Have the content start with these kind of things. So for me, the foundation is, okay, connection is key. So if connection is key, what are the ways I can get that? I can get that through podcasting, through creating community and having community conversations, and in more of a business way, but still a connection, a partnership.
Yeah, I love that. I think those are, maybe some of the most underrated marketing strategies that exist. They
Yeah.
still, in some ways, feel like new, or maybe it's that they're not automated, right? They're not something like they take up a lot of resource. So a lot of people talk about, I'd love to launch a podcast, but it's just a lot of work, and it is. And community, same thing. It's a lot of work to build and maintain and engage a community. But the benefit that you get from that is, maybe just so important and complementary to the automated work that you're doing, that like doing those things together, actually, it's like a rising tide. It really
Yeah.
makes the automated work you're doing that much more powerful.
There's some kind of like natural hesitancy about talking to someone, and not even getting into the latest generation stuff. As marketers, every generation of marketer, I guess if we really wanted to connect a bunch, we would have been in sales, right? So there's this thing where it's like, well, why aren't we connecting? And oftentimes when we say, okay, understand your buyer, immediately they're thinking, or I was thinking in the old days, oh, cool, I'll send a survey out, right? Why? Because you can get structured data and you get good answers. But the other day I got a survey in the email, and it said, okay, what was the number one reason you chose this product, right? And there was 4 options, and none of the 4 were the reason why, like, at all, not even close. And so automatically that survey was broken. The data was incorrect automatically. You're hallucinating before you even hit send on that survey. So because oftentimes it's the second question, it's the follow-up question that gives you the real juice on what led to that buying decision, right? So you got to have those conversations. But there's something a little scary about having conversations. That's why just understanding and creating programs like a pod, like a community, and also partnerships give you permission to connect, right? People say, oh, just give them a call. Well, what if they don't want to talk to me? And well, I don't want to take their time, right? We have to create some different ways that it's okay. We're supposed to reach out. It's like when you it's like the difference between going to a bar or going to a bar at an event, at a marketing event, right? I can talk to anyone at one of those. And if I talk to anyone at the other one, they're like, who's this weirdo? Right. So we just need to give ourselves permission to have these conversations. And something like a podcast to start with is great because it starts out this whole relationship with a give. You're giving your time, your attention, your platform, right? To have me on this show is a gift from you saying, go ahead, Casey, share that knowledge with my audience, with my community. And it's such a great way to start a connection. So that's why you can have conversations with future customers, with future partners, current customers, all sorts of people. And you can ask them questions in a safe environment like this, and they're happy to answer. So like, that's a great way to start and start filling your head with the voice of the customer. Marketing used to be the voice of the customer, right? We were the ones that knew them more than anyone, knew them more than sales. We would, sales explain to sales how they should sell to this customer because we knew them better than they did, right? We gave that up. Maybe we got a little nerdy and techie, and then we forgot that, hey, we own the customer. We can be the voice of that. So I just want to reclaim that for us.
Yeah, I love that. I think that, that's where marketing should be, the voice of the customer, and should really be the ones kind of advocating for what the customer is looking for and what problems you solve. But I think what happened along the way is that the business started to demand more quantitative data from marketing about the value, right? And I get that. And I'm the first one to say data-driven, performance-based marketing is the way that you can, actually help your business to grow. But not everything can be measured the same way. Everything can be measured, but the key is more agreeing as to what success looks like than it is the metric itself. And I think we got all of a sudden we could track everything. We've got Google Analytics, like you mentioned, and 10 years ago, where we could track every touch point on a website, and we can track every email open, and we can track every data point. We got away from the human and we started focusing on the things we could track. And I think in terms of measuring the success of human connection, that's a little bit harder to do. It's not impossible, but it's a little bit harder. So, how do you think about measuring the success of these, more conversational, human-based interactions?
Yeah, the measurement. And like I said, I started this whole thing saying like ROI measurement
Yeah.
changed my life. Like it is the most critical question in marketing. What's working, right? If you can't answer that question, you're in trouble because you're going to start doing things that aren't working and not know it until you're not working there anymore, right? So it's important to understand what's working. But I think sometimes even just obsessing too much over that has created a situation. A recent study came out where it used to be 5 touches, right? Before talking to sales, making decisions, and now it's 15 and now it's 25, right? Now it makes you wonder, does that mean that the prospects are getting smarter and they're consuming more content and more conversations before talking to sales, before buying? Or is it kind of like that old trick on time of page? I don't know if you remember that, where people, they track the time on a website and people would say, well, it went from 30 seconds to 3 minutes. And you had to stop and say, is that because there's more value on that page? Or do we make it harder for them to find what they wanted on the page? So I'm seeing a little bit of this gamesmanship happening. And it's tough. It doesn't feel good to be a marketer where we're playing games. And so let me just pull the curtain back. We're playing games. Hey, let me go to this conference and give away stuffed animals that most people are gonna just take for their daughter. Thank you. That was a great unicorn. And then unsubscribe on Monday, right? Most people are doing that, but some people are gonna take it and eventually they'll let their boss know about some software, or maybe they're gonna get harassed. All these sort of circuitous routes to get around to, I don't know, connecting with the decision maker and having a conversation and solving their pain, right? So we do a lot of these things that maybe we don't need to do. Here's a crazy question for you, right? If the content and the touches are going up, maybe we sort of restrict ourselves. A good friend of mine, Aaron White, he came up, restriction is expression. So if I said, hey, tell you what, you don't get 10 pieces of content. You don't even get 5. If you could only send 1 piece of content to your prospect, what would you send? Right? Would it be a webinar, a white paper? What would it be? But you only get 1. That's it. Game over after that. Okay, now we're thinking a little bit differently. Maybe we can sort of reverse this whole thing. Like what is the quality? So as people go crazy, and literally you could make 50 white papers tomorrow with AI, you could do it. We know we could. Some of us are probably doing it right now because their boss thinks it's a good idea. It's not a good idea. They're not going to see it. There's another stat that came out, like 87% of all content goes unconsumed, right? And that's now, and that's before even this AI thing is really taken over. So more is not the answer. It's really thinking about quality over quantity with the touches, with the conversations, with the content, all of those things.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think we've gone too much in the scale direction. And I actually was watching a video earlier today about AI content creation, and what was being described was basically like the output of AI content is sort of like the most general, basic version of things, right? And we know this, right? It's pretty vanilla, the content that AI is going to create, because it's intentionally pulling from a lot of different sources and trying not to plagiarize. So what you're going to end up is with the most like kind of boring version of that content. And so the way this guy was talking about using that is, that's how I figure out what not to write. I will write content, see what AI spits out, and see, am I writing something similar? If so, I know it's not going to resonate because it's too generic, it's too broad. And if 80% of the content is not getting consumed, like you say, well, guess what? My generic AI generated content is going to be in that 80% because people want something that's really relevant. And I was just having this conversation yesterday on a different podcast about account-based marketing and account-based strategy, and how important it is to have, that for that kind of strategy to work, really hyper personalized content that is intentionally not scalable. You cannot scale that content because as soon as you do, it becomes less effective. And so maybe we're kind of boomeranging back in that direction of like, let's do fewer, more high quality pieces that are really hyper relevant to the audience that we're sending it to, whether it's a segment or an individual company or an individual person. And, that personalization is not, hey, we went to the same college. I found that information on LinkedIn and, put it in my email, but
Here's
it's
some socks.
actually right.
Enjoy.
Yeah. It's actually personalized. And, but again, it takes more work to do that, but it can be a lot more effective.
Yeah, I love that. The idea of the boomerang and coming back to it. It's just, let's stop playing the games. Let me trick you to get on a call. Let me trick you to look at my thing and trick you to engage with me more so I can show more contribution to the revenue. Like, let's reverse a lot of that. And we're going to need to, right? So what's going to quickly happen is all that disconnection is going to continue to get more and more we're going to get more separated because all this content is going to come in and most people aren't going to be listening to this pod, taking these words to heart. But if you do, guess what? You're going to be the trusted source as opposed to the dime a dozen source out there.
Right. Totally. Totally. And so, I mean, you mentioned this before, you're the marketing automation guy, right? You've helped thousands of organizations set up their marketing automation. What do you think separates companies from that are using that technology successfully versus ones that maybe are struggling with it?
Yeah. Is this being helpful? Right. And it was a classic thing I used to say, hey, what's my favorite radio station? An old marketing boss would say, what's my favorite radio station? And I would say, now it's like, what's your favorite Spotify playlist as a marketer? And it's WIIFM. What's in it for me? Right. As a playlist. And I would always have to ask myself, if I'm going to send this email out, let me look at it independently. I know it's pretty. I know it's very clever subject line with emojis, but is this actually helpful for the person I'm sending it to? And let me just put it out there. If it says, check out my brand newly designed website, that is not helpful. That's helpful to you maybe, but not really even that. That's not helpful to anyone. Right. So, or is this white paper actually helpful? Does this solve anything? What is this? Right. So checking on that radio station, checking on that Spotify playlist, what's in it for me as the customer, right? Put on the voice of the customer, put on their jacket, right? And be them for a second and say, if I got this, would this help my day, or am I unsubscribing like yesterday? So when it comes to the automation, yes, sometimes we're all over the place and sometimes we need helpful reminders. Sometimes that's the best part of sales, is just saying, hey, I know this was important. I know we got a million things. I just want to bring this back up. Let's get another call scheduled. And I know that without a little nudging, maybe you'd be stuck in status quo. So I'm just here to help with that. So how can we make that happen on marketing automation to say, hey, I'm just here to be helpful. I know, we've got this going on. So here's a piece of content. No ask required. One of my best and favorite marketing automation nurture emails did not have a call to action, did not have any sort of click track. It was a great piece of content, just shared, hey, quick heads up, here's something I found interesting. And we actually have a screenshot of the response, a prospect who had said, call me in 6 months or whatnot. They got this email, they replied to it, they completely ignored the email, but they said, hey, we did hire that person. We did do the things we said we're going to do. We're ready to talk again. What was the price again? Right. And it was because that wasn't a salesy email. That was just a touch and base. It's Casey, just touch and base, here to help. Right. And maybe, and again, the sales rep needs to be able to focus on the here and now and closing right now. You can really help them out by just being a helpful, nudge, poke. Here's some information. And that's just really what's key. It's a good supporting mechanism, right? But use something like a podcast to zero in, to go for those dream clients and have a real one-to-one conversation, create a relationship and a connection. So it's like you do these things in concert with each other. You have the soloist, you have the really important things, the pod, and then you have more of the many in the community, because some of the best things, maybe you don't have the answer, but perhaps you could bring people together who have the answer. right? You're not this role. You're not the IT manager, asset manager at this large company. You don't actually know. Maybe you kind of know from conversations, but get a couple of them together so they can say, I'm facing this. Oh my gosh, I used this and it fixed it right away. Oh my gosh, thank you. And you were the one that facilitated bringing people together. So that's where community can be so huge too. So again, it's beyond your sort of selfish metrics, and it's focusing way back on helping people.
Yeah, I love that. I think, that's one of the things that we try to do is in content, make sure it's helpful. Like somebody's learning something, somebody can take something away. My biggest pet peeve is when I get like cold emails from sales folks that are like, just checking to see if you got my last email. Like, yeah, I got it. Yours and everybody else's, right? And so, but people that are adding value at every touch point, like, it builds up over time, right? Which is so great. And, you talked a little bit about how podcasts can help. And I love the community description that you do, like just bring people together. Again, how are you being useful? I might not be able to help you, but I know other people that can, and I can be a facilitator for that. So I love that approach. And I'm curious, like to hear a little bit more about how you think about partnerships, which is one of the other things that you mentioned earlier. Like how can that approach help, or how do you even go about setting up partnerships?
Well, one quick thing on community too that you brought up with me, which is, oftentimes when I say, "Oh, hey, we help people create communities over here," they're like, "What app?" Right? And that's indicative of exactly the problem. They go, "What app?" And actually, there's some really great thought leaders on community that I've been listening to. Paul Jones, brilliant. We work with him, and he's like, "Don't start with an app. In fact, it kills your community if you start with an app. Start with the monthly get-togethers, the breakouts, the learning, the collaboration, the community, and then at a certain point of maturity, add an app in." And we get a critical, but it's not about the app. It's so counterintuitive because I'm same way, right? Tech guy. I'm like, oh, what app? Slack, LinkedIn. Oh, the LinkedIn stinks. Oh, we don't do this. Nope. He's like, dude, don't do an app. So you wait. So again, same thing. No technology there. But to your thing on partnerships, Zach Pines, brilliant partner marketer at FormStack, and I thought FormStack would just go away at some point. I'm like, why would people need forms for Salesforce when they already have like their own forms and Pardot and all these other? But you know what? I was wrong. FormStack is bigger and crazier than ever. And I had a chance to reconnect with him on the pod again after like decades. And he is just like the partner wizard. And one of the things he brought up with partnerships is, and I've seen this, I've been around in this, like I had a great partnership with Pardot and everyone else was kind of so-so. Right. And so it's like, what makes for a good partnership? Well, one of the ways he does this is he says, look, you have your conversation, but then you need to bring in the 3 for 3. Right. And so what he says that is if you really want to do this partnership, then you go look and find 3 of your clients and customers who we could totally add value with together. Bring those in. We'll go find 3 of ours that would be a great fit for you. Bring those in. We'll get on a call together and we'll plan out how we can like co-coordinate these things and how to best reach out and how we can just build value for these customers together. I was like, that is so good. It's beyond that. I have had so many conversations, I'm sure you have too, where like, hey, we could be partner. Hey, we could be partner. Cool. Right. And then sometimes you spend hours or days on contract negotiation when that's not even the point. Again, it's kind of like with the community, you're obsessing over the app. With the partner negotiation, you're obsessing over the affiliate commission percentage, and you're never going to send anyone anywhere anyways. So why did you do all that in the first place? Right. So the 3 for 3 is a great way to bring people together and say, how could this work? And how could this work for the betterment of these people, not ourselves?
Yeah. And I feel like it works it's so intertwined with the other things we're talking about too, with podcast and with community, because if you've got that kind of partnership, I love that 3 for 3 idea. It's like, hey, we're all kind of in this together. We got, everybody's going to benefit. Everybody's going to benefit from that. If done properly, right? It can't just be for the sake of doing it. But from there, you've got a community right there. You've got a community of 8 people right there that you're bringing together to help. And, I imagine then in a partnership like that, there's your podcast guests, right? You probably both have a podcast if you're embarking on this type of strategy anyways. So let's, exchange podcasts, and all of a sudden all these things are working together. And there's some of the ways that you can be more efficient with some of these more kind of human-centric efforts, because actually taking one thing and then making it live beyond is such a great way to maximize something that you have to put a lot of energy and effort into. What I see people do a lot is create content, or create a podcast or whatever, and it just lives in isolation. It's its own thing. And we're big believers in, we call it throwing the content a parade, right? We want it to be live and audio and video and social and written, and all stemming from one effort, to really maximize the things that you're putting a lot of energy into. So it doesn't just, become, oh, now we have to do this again in order to create that next thing. But we can actually maximize the effort that is going into it. So I love that.
Content parade, very cool. Cool concept.
Intertwined.
Yeah, intertwined. But yeah, it's so good to highlight. Like, that's the thing. You can't highlight everything. But if you have a central focus and everything gets repurposed, it's like, here's this great conversation. Would you prefer to read it? Would you prefer to read the cliff notes, the transcript? Do you want to hear clips? Do you want to just hear the whole thing because they're just so fun together, right? Like, what do you want to hear, or what do you want to see, or how do you want to learn? And cool. But it all starts with, like, we can promote this thing. The parade can say, look here at Macy's parade and look at this float. Boom. Everything else comes from there. And it's more efficient for you as a marketer, so you can spend more time doing the other things.
Totally. And I feel like that's kind of where technology and human work together, right? To, repurpose some of this content. I'm curious about some of the emerging marketing technologies that you're using to help your processes. But I know, I'm going to take this video and put it into a tool that we use called Opus, and it's going to create clips for us. That's a great way to repurpose this content in an automated way, but we started with human. And so it creates efficiency, but it doesn't take away the connection, which is kind of where you started the conversation, like using technology in a way that doesn't disconnect us further. So looking ahead, like, what are some of those technologies that you think will have a big impact on how businesses connect with customers and how we market, like, also without removing that critical human element?
It's like, it's the recording platforms. It's things like this that I'm most interested in, because if we can make it easier to get on a call with someone, then if you can, it's all about like, good stuff comes in, good stuff goes out. So it's all about, how do we capture things up front? So can we get everyone, there'll be a world where everyone has a microphone, because their voice matters, and we're going to capture it in a good way, and we're going to repurpose the heck out of it. But if we don't have a good quality going in, we have a bad quality coming out. But it's also the questions too. So it's the conversations we're facilitating, whether one-to-one or one-to-many in a community, but it's also, what are we chatting about, right? So I think sometimes what people struggle with is, well, what do I say? And so there's a lot of conversation around the right questions to ask. And there's certain questions to start with, certain questions to not start with. And you definitely don't want to begin your conversation by, what's the big scary monster that you're avoiding here in procrastinating? But, like, start with a question your guest and maybe your ideal customer can win, and ask them what they're good at. I think a lot of times we also focus on what they're bad at, but I've found that one of the best questions you can ask a future customer or prospect or an existing customer is, what's your goal for this year? Or, like, okay, maybe it's not metric driven. Where do you see your organization? Where do you see this company in a year? Where do you want it to be in a year? Dream for a little bit. Here's a magic wand, infinite marketing budget, infinite all these other things. But, like, where do you want it to be? Who do you want to serve? How do you want to serve them? What does it look like? When you get folks dreaming and thinking about those things, now you can identify where their heart's at, where the priorities are at. And just maybe one of the things that you provide, your service or an app, or the different things that you do and your company does, maybe that can help them achieve their goal. And now you're not just coming in as, like you said, one of those sales emails saying, here, check my last email that was also valueless. You're saying, I heard you mention where you want to go, and I feel really strongly that we can help you get there. And
Yeah.
that's a start to a conversation.
For sure. I think you bring up such a good point about asking the right questions, because it can be very easy for people to accidentally lie. They don't mean to, right? But when you say, hey, would you ever be interested in buying a product like this? And they go, yeah, totally. Does this solve your problem? Oh my gosh, yes, I do have that problem. And yes, people say what they want you to hear, and it's not on purpose. It's not on purpose. So the way you ask people questions is so important to kind of help get around that. And I love the getting people dreaming. One of the things I love to ask people is like, what's working well? What's actually in your process today, or in the thing that in the problem you're trying to solve, what's actually working there? Because to your point, everybody's got something that's working. And if it's not even finding out what that thing is, but why, what's the definition of working from the perspective of the person you're talking to? If you can get to that, then you understand the goal in a different way. Sometimes people have a hard time articulating their problem or their ideal outcomes. It's like, I don't really actually know how to describe what it would look like for this to work, but I know it's not working right now. So if you can, get creative with the question wording, you can uncover some things that, maybe you couldn't if you were asking the kind of plain, the everyday questions. I love the magic wand question. That's one of my favorite ones. What would it look like if all of your problems were solved?
Yeah. And some of these questions, you need a little bit of trust.
Yeah.
And so, what's interesting is again, games we play and people automatically are not trusting us, especially if it's a salesperson or a marketing email. It's like antitrust, right? And so one of the things that I find with a podcast, this is why, look, I can talk about podcasts forever, but what I like about it, and we're on one, so it's super meta and fun, is that like I always will do a prep call. And one of the foundations of trust is saying what you're going to do and then doing it, right? Whether it's at home with your family or at work, it's like, I'm going to do this and then I do it. That, even in a small way, right? And so sometimes on a prep, we'll say, I'm going to ask you this question. And guess what? I do. And you're like, okay, he said that would happen and it did happen. There weren't other tricks around that, right? And you had a document, right? You're like, hey, here are the questions and here's what it's going to be like. So you're like describing it and then it happened, right? And so there's different things built into this experience where, well, first of all, you're going to have a chance to chit chat, sort of unscripted, potentially live like this. And you'll know pretty quickly if you would get along in that bar setting, right? If we were at an event, at Dreamforce or something like that, are we getting along? Yeah, we are. And then, oh, wow, she said she would do this. She followed through on that. You start building a real relationship with people, especially when you're focused and you're looking at them. And there's not a lot else we can do these days. Think about it, even in restaurants, how often are we looking at our phones or you see a table of 8 people, grandparents all the way through to grandchildren, and they're all on an iPad or a phone. You're like, guys, look at each other. And so, how often do we get a chance to look at a customer in the eyes? And you can't, like, for something with a podcast, it's kind of cool in a way because you can't look away. Like, you start chatting, I'm not looking at my email because you're going to say something and I'm going to have no idea what you said. And I'm going to look like an idiot. So I need to pay attention. How often do we have customers, prospects paying attention to us when we're chatting? Not very often, because I'm guilty of not even, I'm on a sales call and I'm like checking my email. I don't know. I'm not sure why I'm there, maybe for the $50 gift certificate, right? Again, games. We don't need these games. We can just literally get on a conversation and ask a question you want to know the answer to. That's one of my number one tips for a podcast is don't ask a question you don't want to know the answer to.
Oh, that's interesting. I would have to actually think really hard about what questions I would not want the answer to. Maybe it's easier in this particular show, and I'm curious, and we may have some very lucky
Here's
to have
one. Hey,
great.
what's your favorite approach to analyzing a P&L statement?
Oh God, yeah.
I'm like, well, do you want to answer that?
Right,
And
right.
that's the other thing. It's like oftentimes we make content and webinars and podcasts about ourselves, and we need to be thinking about our customer. So oftentimes, we'll create a podcast from scratch for our customers, and but it's based on their customers. So it's not like, what are you good at? Right? I was working with an accountant today, and he works with marketing agencies, and it's like, well, let's not make an accounting podcast,
Right.
because your clients need you for that. And they would feel very much like an imposter. Again, I do not want to speak to a P&L. I can look at it. As long as the numbers are green, I like that. Am I really the one to teach you how to analyze that? Not really. Do I really even want to talk about it? Not really. But you want to get your guests, your customers in a place where their passion and their expertise overlap, right? They're excited to talk about it, and they actually have something to say about it. And if you get them ranting and raving, that makes for great content. And you make them feel good too. You gave them a platform to just totally crush it.
Yeah. I love that. Yeah, that's a great point. And getting people to talk about the stuff they're expert in, on track, stuff that people actually care about. You said the what's in it for me.
Yeah.
I love that. I talk about the so what all the time. Why would somebody care to get this email or listen to this episode, or whatever the content might be. So the so what is so important. And sometimes it's just like a good check for myself. We get so tunneled into like our lists and our stuff, and our strategies, and we've got to do this thing because it was next on the list. Well, so what? Why are we doing that?
Yeah.
Or months later, we've been doing something and we just keep doing it because it's on the calendar, without double checking that it's working.
Yeah. So what? Why? We've always done it this way. Why? Like, so
Yeah. Seems to
mix
be
it up.
pretty effective. Well, what does that mean, right? So that measurement is really important. And I think as we're talking, and I'm thinking about like where's the best place for technology in this human centered marketing world, and it really is in tracking the effectiveness of the work that you're doing, right? And also like maybe thinking about the customer journey and segmenting, like, are people in the right place to have that conversation with you? Are we trying to have a bottom of funnel conversation at a top of funnel moment? And really segmenting people and tracking effectiveness is probably the best use of technology in the context of everything that really should be getting more human.
I think that's well said. It's like, how can you cause no harm, right? Even just some of the basic, look, don't treat your prospect who just met you, or don't treat the person who's been in a sales process with you forever as someone who just met you. I remember it was a couple of years ago, I was using Zoom early on. No, it was GoToMeeting. RIP. I was GoToMeeting, and I was about to buy a huge license for my company, a number of seats for the thing, and it was going to be a little pricey. And I was about to sign. I had the agreement in hand, and then I got an email from GoToMeeting Marketing, and it said, "Hey, 50% off all seats, and something free." And I was like, "Cool." I got the email. I hit forward to the sales rep, and I said, "I want this." And you have to imagine the sales marketing, what are you doing? The guy was about to buy from me. So if we can leverage marketing automation and all these other things to like keep track of where people are at, meet them where they're at. Hey, hands off. This one is contract sent, hands off marketing, unless you're going to nudge them without a price decrease. But someone early on in the process, let's treat them. So it's like, treat people the way that we can treat them in the stage they're at. Same thing with a customer. This person's been a lifelong customer. Let's not treat them like a prospect accidentally. Let's grow the account, not treat them like a noob. Let's show them some respect. They've been a customer for years. Let's treat them really well. I always liked, it's kind of, cliche or kind of kitschy and gamey, but like the insurance companies are like, "Hey, you've been with us for 6 years. So you're a diamond platinum, super insurance person. You haven't had any coverages, and it just means you probably wasted all that money, but that's okay." But it's like, at least they're saying, "Hey, you've been around for a bit. You're this thing." And even if it means nothing, but just kind of nice, right? And maybe it has a few perks to it, but at least they're saying that they know that you've been around for a while, not treating you like you just got there.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so important. And just even saying, we know who you are.
Yeah.
We're paying attention. We know who you are. We know you're new, or we know you're not new, or we know you're somewhere in the middle, and here's how. And I've seen a lot of B2B marketing platforms adopt stuff like that. I think Canva does that really well. There's some others that kind of recognize you've done this many designs, you've sent this many emails. Like, thank you so much for being such a loyal user, or being a power user, or whatever the case may be. And so, yeah, that's it's a great way to, it's just important to do it and do it right, because that's the expectation, right? I know that you're tracking my behavior. We've all gotten over that hump of being worried about our data getting tracked on the internet. I expect now that when you serve me an ad, that it's for something that I actually want, that I haven't already purchased, because I purchased it. So stop giving me that ad. When it's done wrong, it's almost more impactful than when it's done right. So doing it right is almost table stakes.
100%, right? Like, that's why I have to, Instagram is the app I delete on a bi-weekly, monthly basis, only to reinstall a week later, because for many reasons, but one of them is their ads have me figured out. But it's in a good way. I remember buying 2 things and almost buying a third thing in the same period of time on Instagram, being like, hold a second, what's going on here? I got to close this app down. But like, they were all things I needed or wanted or thought were just brilliant for me, relating to either mountains or this or that. And I was just like, oh yeah, this is great. This is exactly what I need. Bye. Right. So like, I'll take that any day over, something completely irrelevant, like what you see on a lot of TV right now, like the old school TV with ads, or you watch like reruns of the Golden Girls, because I know we're all watching those people, and then you get ads and you're like, dang, who are watching this? Because these ads are for someone else. But I love when it's contextual like that, and I respect it. But you're right, it is table stakes.
Yeah. And it goes back to understanding your customer, like we were talking about from the beginning, and sort of, I'm glad that the industry is moving back there, or has started to, some better than others, really go back to marketing being the voice of the customer, and serving the voice of the customer, which is just so critical to the effectiveness of marketing as a whole.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I mean, this has been amazing to catch up with you and to hear your perspective on this. I've known you as the marketing automation guy and the data guy. So I love that we're having a human conversation years later. And yeah, I just really appreciate you sharing your insights on balancing technology with human connection. So thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me. This has been so much fun.
Absolutely. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to Marketing Demystified wherever you get your podcast. Join us next time for more conversations that help demystify the complex world of marketing.